Hey, happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show from Trust Insights. I'm Katie Robert. Today I am joined by John Wall. Chris is doing a marketing profs live session. Feel free to catch that. Our replays are always available at trustinsights.ai/YouTube. Today we are doing something a little bit different. We are actually going behind the scenes of marketing over coffee. If for some reason you've been living under a rock and you don't know what marketing over coffee is, it is one of the longest running, if not the longest running, marketing focused podcasts. It's been around for what, John, 12 years, 13 years?
Oh man, we're going on 14 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Ancient in podcast terms.
Well, and that's it. Like, that's a long running podcast. And so one of the questions that we get a lot is, how do you do it? And so that's a big question. So we're going to focus specifically today on the production of marketing over coffee. And John, since you are the talent, the guy, the producer, the creator of Marketing Over Coffee, co-hosted by Chris Penn, you're going to give us a little bit of the behind the scenes of what's going on. And I'm going to have a lot of questions for you because I actually don't know how you produce Marketing Over Coffee week after week. So this is going to be educational for me as well as the audience. So I think we're ready to get into it.
Yeah, that sounds good. We can talk about kind of, because it's funny, people know listen to the show and they hear what's going on and they know the guests, and it's always the same format. We've kept it in the same shape for years, but the actual tool set and the processes that I used to put it together have changed a lot over the years. And so, yeah, we'll give everybody a picture of kind of how things work. The best place to start is with just, getting the audio, recording the audio. And there's two major areas where the shows tend to come from. Over the past 5 years, the online tools are so good now that it's actually easier to capture great audio just online. So Chris and I are both actually in our home offices, and we use a tool called Squadcast. And in fact, I can bring a screen up just so you can get a feel for what that looks like. And you'll notice when you see this thing is that it is astoundingly like every other online meeting software that we have given our lives to over the past 8 months here in COVID. So it's just like a Zoom call or a Skype call or whatever. And and we don't even have to keep our angry countenances up there, right? Looking mean and angry. But a big thing with this is something that's happened about 4 years ago in browsers. They added some additional technology and actually opened up the hardware so that when we use Squadcast here, it's actually recording on your local computer. So there's a file being generated on my side, on my computer, and one on Chris's end. Because in the past, people have used stuff like Skype. What's happening there is the audio is getting compressed at the local, at the guest's computer, and then being pushed up to the Skype servers. And so when you're recording that, you're actually not getting the best quality audio. You're getting, it really depends on how good your guest's internet connection is. And so if they have a great connection, it could be fine. But, everybody knows Skype siloning, like they talk about, where, you start to lose the other person. So that can be terrible. So by using Squadcast, there's Zencaster is a similar tool. But you actually get an audio file, from the user that you download when you're done. And now you have two separate tracks too, which is critical, because now I can go through and clean up, my audio. If there's a fan in my background, I can take that out of my file without touching the guest's file. And of course, I've been through a lot of the headache. It's more often that the guest file has some kind of weirdness going on in the background, and you can, pull that out and clean things up. So that's online. I will just mention for a second, doing stuff on site. If you are in a situation, a lot of times for Marketing Over Coffee, we'll go to Inbound or Dreamforce or one of these shows where I'm able to get, 6 or 8 guests in a single shot over a couple of days. It just makes things a lot easier to do as far as lining up interviews. But now you're jumping into the whole, being on site and having to capture audio with microphones in the field. And that, this is a whole another art that we could talk about forever. But the easy answer to this is I have the Zoom H6, and as you can see, it's covered with dust because it hasn't left for the field in like a year now. I should have cleaned that up before I did this shot, but we're going to live with this. This is a great little unit because it can take 4 microphones. As you can see, those 4 knobs at the top, you can control the gain, the volume on all 4, and it just records to a micro SD card. And so that's a great device to just kind of take with you to run around and capture audio out in the wild. And of course, it doubles for me. Why it's on the desk and dirty is because that's actually my backup recording. So I have Squadcast recording a file for each person, but then the audio that I hear, which is myself mixed and my guest, both go out into that recorder. And so I record everything on the side. So even if everything internet related were to tank, I still have a file that I can pull down off of there and still make the show. Now, it's not going to be as good because the tracks are going to be mixed. Me and the guest are on the same track, but at least gives us an opportunity to, in the event of total software failure, I can pull something out.
So, John, we already have a question from Chip. Have you found Squadcast reliable? And I know that a lot of these systems, as you were mentioning, comes down to not only your internet and your audio, but a lot of what you can't control is your guest. And I know, some people don't use headphones. They just talk through their computer speakers, or they call in, or, they don't have the option to hardwire. So, what do you think about this? Like, why Squadcast? Yeah,
it's a great question. And Chip is, he's recorded for many years. He knows a lot of this stuff. And that was exactly the deal with, Zencastr is a good product, but especially in the first year that they opened up, there were a lot of times when, the guest file would just get lost, or I'd have a guest who would bail immediately and run away, and the file upload hadn't completed from their machine. Like, you could have a file stuck on your guest's machine and you've got nothing. Zencastr does a nice job in that while it's recording locally, it does also have a copy up on their server. So if something does totally tank, you have the Squadcast file up on their server that you can always grab. And now it may not be as good as that one locally, but you'd never get caught in a situation where you would totally get tanked. And again, the backup recorder that I was showing off there, like that was, I would use Zencastr, and if it tanked, I didn't really care because I did have a backup that was okay. And so I was more willing to put up with the occasional flakiness. But yeah, it's kind of, the technology is moving so fast that I found Squadcast to be a lot faster, more reliable, better sound. And even I've talked to them. Now, they say that they don't do any post-processing on the audio, but it seems like the files just always sound better when I get them from them. So I think they are doing something on the back end that they don't want to talk about. But yeah, those are they're a great tool. We've used it for over a year. They do not pay me. I actually pay for the service out of pocket for what we make in the show. So I'm just a happy customer and can say that. Chip brought up another thing too. He said, in fact, we should throw this one up there on the board. We should bring back the coffee shop sound. So for the first 10 years of the show, Chris and I used to record in a Dunkin' Donuts near where we live because we used to live within a few miles of each other. And one thing is, it's a lot easier in the field to record because there was always this background noise going of the coffee machines and people in the store and all this stuff. And by having that low bed of noise, now if you have weird, annoying sounds like humming microphones or some other kind of problem, that gets buried in the noise, and it makes it very easy to make a great recording if you have this background noise to kind of cover all the sins, the hums and static or whatever. So yeah, shout out to the only one was, tough when people would start yelling at each other in Portuguese at 5 a.m. That got to be a little bit weird.
Yeah, as a former Dunkin' Donuts employee, I have experienced that. Would you ever, well, I guess you don't record video for your, like you use Squadcast, which has the video option, but really you're not posting any of the video where, when Chris and I do in-ear insights, we've actually just started recording the video. We stick it up on YouTube. Would you ever put up like one of those fake coffee shop backgrounds so it kind of looks like you guys are in the same spot?
Yeah, we could do that, and I play around with it. The big thing is just that when you look at, post-processing and editing time, it's like a factor of 10. If you're doing something in writing, you edit it instantly and you're done. If you have audio to edit, now you're talking about, 3 hours of work for 1 hour of audio. And for video, it can be 10 hours of work for 1 hour of video. And then, excuse me, it's easy to cheat with audio, right? If there's 5 seconds where something goes wrong, I just clip it out and throw it away. Whereas in video, if something goes wrong, well, then you either need some B-roll to jump to, or you're just going to have a jump cut, where somebody's head just pops from here to there. And, the the customer in the background just vanishes. You have weirdness that you can't get around. So, but yeah, I keep threatening to do video, and it's just so much time that I haven't gotten around to it. But it is interesting to note that that is another thing with Squadcast that I had discounted. I didn't really care that much about being able to see the guests, but what I found over the past year is when the guest can see you as you're having your conversation, it does kick it up a whole nother level. People get excited to see you get excited, and you can see the expressions on people's faces. And I find that I get better sounding audio because people can see each other. And so that's just, something as far as making quality stuff. If you can see the other person, it makes it easier to cue. And I think the other thing with that, it's easier to see the cues. When somebody else is thinking about jumping into a conversation, you can see that on their face. Whereas if you're blind, it's, you're not able to kind of take care of that as easily.
Now, you and Chris do Marketing Over Coffee. This is a weekly show. This isn't like a once a month or once in a while. You have consistently done this week over week for the past 14 years, right?
Yeah. So our schedule with our sponsors, so we say to our sponsors, look, every quarter we guarantee 10 shows. So out of the 12 weeks, we're going to get 10 shows done. And so that does give us some padding. Just every once in a while, we'll have a week where we're both traveling or something will go wrong where, we were supposed to record with somebody and they bailed and now we have a gap. And then what usually happens is we normally still put out 11 or 12 shows a quarter. So we do have a couple weeks in there as padding. But yeah, it's basically, a really solid calendar as far as production of, I record Mondays and Tuesdays in the mornings. Usually that's when we try and schedule everybody for recording. And then Wednesday, I will edit the show for that week. Thursday, it will get cleaned up and posted on the servers and tested. And then it's always available by 4 a.m. on Friday so that everybody for their Friday, getting off to work or whatever they're doing, they get it first thing in the morning and they can go. But the real, the insane amount of work is if you don't have somebody that you have a standing time with, it's that scheduling of the appointments to get some, a guest on. I mean, it can just, there have been plenty of guests where it's taken months to try and line something up to get them on board and make things work. And there have been plenty of guests that it just never happens, after, dealing with people's assistants and being passed around for 3 or 4 months, it finally just vanishes and goes away. So yeah, that's a kind of a hidden part to, coming up with great content is you get lost in the shuffle and you just, got to keep digging to find it out. So a great thing with that is to always try and have one evergreen episode in the can. We always try to have one interview that's backlogged so that if something goes wrong, we can at least roll something and not miss a week, which is critical.
That's usually when you're like, hey, Katie, what are you doing today? Time to record an episode?
Katie, yeah, we got a topic we want you to talk about. Whatever you want.
So one of the questions that comes up a lot is around the gear that you use. So obviously you're showing, this portable recorder. You've talked about Squadcast, but we get a lot of questions about cameras, microphones, those kinds of things. We actually got that specific question here from Brian. He's saying he doesn't have a podcast, but I would imagine that the tech should be roughly the same, whether or not it's for a podcast or for an online course or a webinar or some sort of other event that you're doing. Do you have, I work with you day in and day out, and I know that you are always on the hunt for new headphones or a new microphone, or you're Frankenstein your own headphones, or you're doing something. And I've actually been on the receiving end of some of these things that you've put together yourself. But do you have sort of your standard, this is the brand I always go to, or at least this is a style of microphone or headphone or whatever it is?
There's a couple fronts. So microphones, of course, that's just kind of a joke among anybody that's podcasted for more than a year is, you can go into these user forums and they'll be talking about microphones nonstop for years on end. And there's a bunch of different things you can do. First and foremost is that so much of the gear you just buy kind of without even trying is pretty good. You can come up with something that works pretty well without working at all. So one thing that I do have, actually, let me pull this one up too, is instead of just using your computer, I actually have an audio interface. So this is the Yamaha box. And so it's a USB device. It's not even self-powered. You just plug it in via USB and it will run. And the big win is you get this plug up here on the top, which is an XLR jack. It's a 3-pin, a very large, headphone jack, which I have a billion of these all over the place. You can actually see what that thing looks like right there. And the idea with this is it's locking so that it can't get pulled out in the field, when something's going on. But with a box like this, it totally changes the game, because now you can get any professional microphone and plug it in there. You've got over here, I've got a gain slider, so I can, mute myself, pull myself back, or make myself louder. And then even like that cheesy effects button. I don't know. They always put these on the podcast box, which no one would ever use except to show off, I guess.
I'm kind of jealous that I don't have that on my side.
I know, the God button. It's so
It really
ridiculous.
is.
And the funny thing is that you have that, and there's some things that are missing on this box, and we'll get into that a little bit. But the other big wins are, so I've got that headphone control right over here. I can control my monitor, what I'm listening to, and I can loop back the computer sounds too. So if I'm playing music on my machine, or we're doing some kind of, clip, I can actually loop that back. And then the other thing is that it's real-time monitoring. So this is plugged in, and I actually hear myself in my mic as we were talking. Like a lot of times, if you plug into your own machine, you won't be able to hear what's going on in the background. Yeah, that's funny. Chip says it's a Shure thing. I've got my Shure swag. They sent me a t-shirt, so they're getting their money's worth out of this free plug. Yeah, the Shure. So the Shure actually just came out with a new podcasting mic, the MV6, which I took for a test spin last week. And, that's like a $250 mic. That's not really messing around, but it has a lot of neat functions on it, and it's very easy to travel with. So that's a good one. As far as cheap mics, so this mic that I'm using here, this is my go-to for every day. This is the V-Moda Boom Mic. So V-Moda are known for their DJ headphones, is their big thing, but they made this boom mic for gamers, and it's a $29 microphone. And it's just insane that, I've tested this out against microphones that cost $400 or $500, and I'm still happier with this. And this gets into a little bit about kind of the big thing with microphones is there's tons of different microphones that all have different usages. Like this boom mic, because it's never more than like 2 or 3 inches from my face, it's much easier for it to get great audio. The other big mics that you would have placed around your desk, once you start to get more than 12 inches away from the mic, the sound quality starts to go down, and it doesn't sound as great. So again, now, of course, the flip side, I have to wear my Time Life.
You mean like these?
Yeah, the massive cans, right? That's right. You've got your boom mic ready to go there. Keep it just out of frame.
The thing, that brings up an interesting point. So obviously I have the big professional mic, but I have to be angled in a certain way for it to pick up the audio correctly. And a lot of times the way that it needs to be angled versus where my camera is, it just completely blocks my face. And that's one of the reasons I tend to not use it, even though I get better audio than I do from just my AirPods, which is really sort of the lazy route. And the quality of my audio is good enough, but probably not as good as it could be. So I, a million years ago, was a film student. And so, I learned all about audio for movies and short films and those kinds of things. And you have like your windscreens, your omnidirectional, your lavalier mics, and all of these things are applicable to, this podcasting as well. Because if you have someone who's using a lavalier mic, and I've interviewed people who've done that, it's constantly rubbing against their clothes, especially as they're moving around. Or if you do have a microphone like the one that I just showed, it's a good mic if they are angled it the right way and they're not moving around. Or you have people like me who just are lazy and use whatever earphones they have in, and the audio is okay, but not great. And sometimes they'll die, especially if they're Bluetooth and you've been wearing them all day. So it sounds like the one that you have, the one that you're wearing right now, is sort of almost like the America's Test Kitchen. Like, we tested all the things, and here's the best bargain one that gives you all of the things for the least amount of money. That's the affordable option.
Yeah, and it's in fact, Chip brought up another point about that. It's people who aren't disciplined to stay on target. They talk about microphone technique. A big part of that is making sure that no matter how excited or what you're talking about, you still stay on axis. You're talking right into that microphone. And when I'm recording with Chris, a lot of times I'm having to go from, camera to show notes to the backup recorder to the timer. So I'm always moving. So having the boom is much easier and better, for me kind of staying on mic. And that tends to work a little better. Another thing to look at is a lavalier microphone, a clip-on mic. Audio Technica makes a good $70 one. And this, I have to be careful of pulling it out of the pile. I don't want to unplug my hot mic here as I'm grabbing stuff. But, it's just a clip-on mic that can go on your shirt lapel, wherever, and it has a belt pack. If you don't want to have the mic in the frame, that's the easiest way to go with that, is to get something on there.
We actually use those. So I've traveled with you before, and it was interesting because I didn't realize all of your gear. You had your regular, your backpack, your overnight bag, but then you had this roller bag, and I was like, what the heck does he need all that stuff for? And it's all of your equipment, and it's a lot of the equipment that you're showing, and you always have the backup mic, the backup to the backup mic, the backup to the backup to the backup mic, and all the wires and the cords. And so it sounds like it's not just enough to just like log on to a Zoom call, record the audio, and say, okay, it's probably good enough. You're a big, champion of having, there's a backup audio recording, you have a backup mic, you have a backup plan, because I'm guessing you've been through enough situations where the audio has just crapped out and it's not been there at all.
Yeah, well, there's two big parts of that. So one is, if you're fortunate enough to land some kind of magic interview and the file gets lost, there's, you may never be able to get that back. Like I had a couple years ago, I was lucky enough to get Simon Sinek and Seth Godin at the same time. And, I could, reset up a call with both of them, but I wouldn't be able to get the two of them together, in the same day. Without ponying up more money than I have to pony up. So knowing if the stakes are high and you can't lose it. And then the other part of this, unfortunately, people just kind of think like, well, any audio that's good enough will work. But the reality is that you are competing against NPR and all these top ranked podcasts, right? People only have so many hours to listen to audio content. And hopefully your content's unique enough that they're going to make time for you. But still, if the sound becomes annoying or is just so distracting that it takes away from the message, you're going to lose the battle. So I've spent a lot of time studying and testing different gear to see where we're going to go. And the other thing that you hit too is, just recording live in a virtual session like this is good. It's pretty much one set of gear will get it done. But as soon as you go out into the field, it becomes a whole nother game of like, okay, is everybody going to be around a table, or are they going to be more than 5 feet apart? Or even am I trying to grab somebody on stage so I can screw up another video for us at Trust Insights when we try and record a keynote, which seems to crash every time for me.
It's why there's no actual video of me doing anything.
No, there's really not. I'm getting dragged down a rat hole here, but it is an internal joke about how I've probably shot about 10 videos for Trust Insights as far as inbounds, and every time it fails. Again, maybe that's video telling me that they don't want me around too. That could be part of that. But
so you guys have obviously been doing this for a very long time, 14 years. You said, what are some of the things, aside from the fact that all of the tech has completely changed, what are some of the lessons that you learned over the years of like looking back, oh, I wish I hadn't done it that way, or that was a bonehead move, or that was sort of a rookie mistake? Like, what are some of those, things that like you and Chris did in the very beginning that you look back and you're just like, I wish we'd known then what we know now to do it differently? Like, what are some of those pro tips that you can give someone who's just starting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been pretty lucky with Marketing Over Coffee in that I've maybe lost 1 or 2 interviews that I had to go to the backup recording and they came out pretty poorly. I was actually podcasting for a couple of years before I started Marketing Over Coffee. And that was back in the day where even there was no Skype or Zoom that worked well. And I had some hardware so that I could capture telephone calls. I would actually call somebody up on a landline and record them.
Like a landline?
Yeah, like an actual landline phone. And so I did this interview with Ben. Oh, Ben is like, he's like the spyware sheriff. He's out of MIT. He was out of MIT at that point, and he's an attorney. And his basic thing was, he was like figuring out all these scams that everybody was doing. Nobody really knew what the heck was going on with a lot of the spamming and stealing of data. And he kind of got into it and figured out what the story was. But getting audio over telephone just sounded like hell. I mean, he was actually, I don't think he'd ever be on the show again if I invited him back. I'd have to come up with a fake name to invite him on the show again. But yeah, now the video fails are just endless, though. You know, I have a million stories for that. The biggest mistake you can make is just not having enough practice with your hardware. So I was using this DJI video camera when we were recording Chris down at Talkwalker in New York City. And, you know, this is just a handheld, and it's an amazing camera because it has a gimbal built into it. So as I run this, you'll be able to see the head will just move around. And even when I pan or move, gimbal protected. Let me get that back. There we go. So it snaps too. You can see that it just moves on its own. And now when I move around, it still stays on focus. So I was like, all right, this is fine. I hit the go button, record, and everything's good. Well, I didn't realize at one point where I had swiped across the machine, because it's just a swipe touchscreen, and I put it into time-lapse mode by mistake. So Chris's like 60-minute session ended up being like a 4-minute video with him running around like it was some kind of Benny Hill thing. You know, I could have just put the, you know, and
well, we need to do that now, so that's on the list of things.
yeah, of stuff to do. So it's, you know, not having enough practice with your gear, not having backup. In fact, the best people, like, I'm not even at that pro level. There's people that say like you should be able to use all your gear blindfolded. You know, you should be able to have your eyes closed and fire the camera up, stop it, restart it. You know, whatever stuff you're using, you should be able to operate it without being able to see it. And of course, it's kind of tough on a touch screen, but you know, if your life depended on it, you want to be able to get it and roll.
So one of the questions I know also comes up a lot is, so, you know, we're in this resurgence of the podcast. The podcast is the thing. You know, obviously we've all been stuck at home with the quarantine. And so people have turned to live streams, like we have podcasts, all of those things. How do you get your podcast seen? Is it SEO? Is it promotion? Is it sponsors? Because you have to get your podcast up somewhere in order for people to even know it's a thing. Like, can you talk with us a little bit about podcast promotion?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that is kind of a problem still to this day with podcasting, is that discovery is kind of a problem. I mean, unless you go to, you know, you go up to iTunes and search the directories over there, or, you know, now of course there's plenty of decent podcast apps like Stitcher and some of these other things. But really people just tend to search Google, you know, so having great content and trying to do transcripts of shows, that can help. But yeah, there's really no quick and easy, you know, way just to grow your audience. And the thing that I found for us, it's always been slow and steady organic growth. You know, every year we just kind of pick up between 10 and 20% of listeners. And we've kind of reached the stage now too. And I should be clear on that as far as the SEO stuff. It's become to the point now where it's fully meta. So over the years, we've been making these lists of like top 10 podcasts to watch. So now when you look for top marketing podcasts, you just get a page of top 10 podcasts to listen to. Excuse me. And so, yeah, it's, you know, unfortunately the best way to do it, if you want to kind of get found the way we do, is you should already be doing it for 12 years. Like, that's the only easy way to get there. Like, is if you have the momentum, you're going to be in good shape. And even I've searched high and low to find ways to promote. A lot of the bigger podcast networks, like, they only want to talk to major brands. You know, they're not interested in, you know, one-offs with single shows. We do run Facebook, Google ads, LinkedIn ads. I tend to do that for single episodes, especially for certain guest shows. You know, when we have guests who I know can pull and have their own audiences across social media, I can run Facebook ads and target their audiences. And so that's an easy way to kind of get some traction and to get exposure to a new audience. So that makes it, you know, easy to get in. Yeah. And then don't ever underestimate your guests. You know, every time you get a decent guest that has a following, they're usually going to be glad to push what they've got going. And I guess this is an inside trick too. I mean, I've mentioned it on the show, the listeners know this, but anytime somebody comes out with a new book, they're going to want to get on all the fronts they can get on. So you just need to stay in front of them and find out when people have books coming on, and, you know, 2 or 3 months before their book is getting ready to drop, you can say, hey, you know, send me a gallery of your book. Let's get you on the show. So we can then drop the show on their book launch date, because that's the big thing for Amazon, right? They want to get as much traffic in that first week as they can to get rolling. But yeah, I don't know. Other questions? Anything else we want to take out of the pile?
Yeah, there's plenty of questions. people are definitely interested in this topic because it's something that we're all trying to figure out. So one of the easier questions is, let's see, when was the last time you and Chris were in the same place to record? And so I can say it's at least 8 months, and then add on, however much time. But when was the last time you and Chris actually recorded in a coffee shop?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Daniel has been a long-time friend of the show. He has been listening for at least a decade, so it's good to see you, Daniel. Last time we were in the same room, I think it might have been at Talkwalker back in October of last year. I think it's been like a year since we've been in the same room. The virtual recording is just so much better now that there's really no point in us doing it live unless there's some other guests that we're going to be able to loop in and get in front of. But yeah, and it's been so cool in that over the past 5 or 6 years, the show has picked up enough momentum that we have fans in the UK and in Australia and in Asia. And I would just so much love to take the show on the road and hang out and meet some of these guests from all over the place, because I really, all my travel has pretty much been domestic US. But yeah, with COVID, none of that's going to be happening in the next, the foreseeable 6 to 8 months. So, but yeah, I would love to get out and do a road show. And then the other huge one is, again, all the major shows, Dreamforce, Inbound, CES, all those tend to be good stops just because we can get a bunch of guests, in one shot.
Another question, and I don't know if you actually want to admit the real answer to this question. How much money do you estimate you've spent on podcast video gear over the past 14 years?
Yeah, that's, the good news is my wife is not watching streaming today. In fact, I should check the list to make sure she's not on here. But yeah, it is. So it's nuts when people are like, oh, wow, you guys have made it and it's all strong. I spent over $100,000 in like the first 8 years of the show on everything, all in. And a lot of that was travel to crazy places. And, so it's been insane how much money has been spent. And it really only flipped profitable on a year-to-year basis, like around year 12. So yeah, it's a little frightening how much cash ended up getting thrown into the pile. The one neat thing though, and this is a trick a lot of audiophiles do with audio gear too, is like you only have to buy one $1,000 microphone, because then you can play with it. And when you don't like it, you can flip it. There's a bunch of forums or on eBay, and you can probably get $950 for it. So like once you level up your gear to professional level, you only have to do that once, because you can constantly churn gear and, get upgraded and moving. And yeah, we haven't talked about the post-production and software. If we want to get into that, we could talk a little bit about what goes on there.
Here, they want to know how the heck you do all this stuff.
Where else it goes. Yeah, there's a couple things we can show off with this. So now we've got the audio file, and the next step is to try and bring it up to that NPR level, make it sound great no matter how sketchy the quality of the original recording was. And so let me pull up the, here we go. If you share up the screen again so people can see this. So now I use Adobe Audition just because I use Dreamweaver and Photoshop and a bunch of other tools. So it's air quotes free because I'm buying all the other stuff. What is the Audacity is an audio editor that's free that a lot of people use. Pro Tools is kind of the musician's choice. But basically you've got this file here, and it's just a matter of, so I will actually create a multi-track file out of this. So let's do a new multi-track session, and we'll just call this one a test. And as this gets put together, I then have the two files that came out of Squadcast. So there's me on the top track, and here's my guest, our VP of marketing from Jones Soda, which is the show we'll be dropping this week. And now, so this is just, if you've used a video editor or any kind of linear editor, you'll see, non-linear editor, you'll see, they're all the same, basically, in the same idea, in that you have the track, you can move back and forth, you can cut chunks out of it. But here's the secret sauce stuff. So I have a bunch of presets. There's a bunch of effects that have been built. And so this is the latest iteration of that. And so to give you an idea of what's going on, these are all effects on the left side that can be turned off and on. But the first FFT filter is actually they call it a high pass filter. So if I'm recording here at my house and there's a train going by outside, which happens like every 3 or 4 hours. There's this low rumble. That filter will actually take those low rumbles out. And so you just hear my voice. The mastering effect is actually, this is one of those things. So mastering is most common in music. There's these gurus who will take these files and shine them up so that they just sound better. And so I've got a little bit of reverb on there. It's a little bit of echo chamber to make things sound bigger. The exciter gives it a little bit more high end, makes it sound a little brighter. The widener gives it a little bit more of a stereo effect. And then I've got a loudness maximizer. So you've got all these different little knobs and buttons to tweak to kind of make things sound bigger and more impressive. And there's a de-esser on there. Okay, so the S is that sibilance, which sometimes causes problems in recordings.
Oh, and like that pop and that hiss.
Yeah, definitely the hiss. And even the pops is different. The pop we can kind of kill with a different set of filters. But yeah, you throw that on there. And actually, it's been so long since I've tweaked this far down in. I'm trying to remember. Oh, this is a noise gate down here. So this is just like I mentioned with the, in fact, that first FFT filter is rumbling noises specific to mishandling a microphone. Like if the mic gets bumped, you get kind of that weird thump. That kills those. This high pass down here, noise gate, is taking out just air conditioner, trains, refrigerator noises, all those lame things. And then the last one in this series is a compressor, and this is a critical one. The idea with this is if my voice gets really quiet or if it gets very loud, it will actually expand the volume so that it's more consistent across the board. And so anybody listening to podcasts, you've listened to these casts where somebody gets really quiet, and so you turn the volume way up, and then somebody comes in really loud and you go deaf. And or in your car, this happens a lot in your car because it's too tough to get the full dynamic range in your car because of the rumble of the traffic in the car itself. And so by using that compressor, we're able to get kind of a more just solid, meaty sound. A good way to think about it is that kind of that AM radio sound, where it's very present and never drops below a certain level.
Now, the big question that I have is, do you have some sort of editing effect for the persistent dog barking? Because this is an issue that I run into all the time, as my dogs are constantly in the background. And, that's more of a joke, but, there's always like background noise, like especially where we're all home now, you might have like someone doesn't know that you're recording. So they pop in and they start talking to you, not realizing that you're on the air. Or if you're like me, your dogs always know when you're trying to do something, and that's when they start acting up. Like, is there a good way to get that audio cleaned up, or do you just have to re-record it?
Yeah, so there's, it's always cheaper, easier, better to try and get it out in the recording. And yeah, the easiest one is to ride the gain, as we say. In fact, as you were talking, I pulled the volume down, was busy coughing up a lung, and and mostly back to normal.
He's not sick, it's just allergies.
Yeah, well, no, it's just talking so much. Plus, I haven't done like our keynotes in 8 or 9 months, so this doesn't happen anymore. But yeah, that working, and then what we just talked about at the beginning, having 2 separate tracks. My dogs can be going berserk over here, but if I've got me on one track and you're on the other, the times where you're talking, I just delete that section of the track. Throw the dog noises away. The problems will come if they're barking exactly as you're speaking, then your best guess, your best move is just say, hey, can you repeat that one sentence again? Get it again. There is, in post-processing here, Audition uses some tools made by a company called Isotope, which are the top-end audio cleanup tools. And you can do some crazy stuff. Like if you have glasses clinking in the background, you can literally just cut and grab the glasses and pull them out, because those glasses are high-frequency noise, and it's really easy to see them in a spectral scan. But dog barking is pretty close to the human voice range, and so that becomes a lot harder. You really can't pull those out automatically. But that does remind me. So yeah, there are 2 tools that are cheap or free. One is called the Lavalier, where it's a free piece of software. You drag and drop the audio file onto it, and it will do this compression and some leveling so that it just kind of sounds nice and even across the board. Or if you're in a situation where you have a guest and you're at differing levels, it will match that up and pull that together. The other one is Sound Soap, and I can't remember the company name because they've been through some weird acquisitions, but you can just look for Sound Soap, and that's like a $90 tool where you can go through, and this is important. What you want to do is set up the mics in the room, and at the beginning and end of your recording session, capture about 10 or 15 seconds of the room sound. Because then with a tool like Sound Soap, you can go in and say, okay, here's 5 seconds of noise from the front of the file. Go pull that out of the recording, and it can actually do that.
Mm-hmm.
If there's air conditioner noise or electrical hum or whatever, it can pull that out of the file. So those are two good tools for kind of getting better sound out of what you've been given, especially if it's been second-rate stuff.
Got it. Now, on the topic of post-production, one of the questions that actually came up, again, from Daniel was, have you thought about new intro and outro music? Now, I don't know if this is a criticism or just sort of a joke, but it actually brings up a really good point of copyright infringement. So, one of the things that you need to be aware of if you're producing your own podcast is, are you trying to use copyright music, the rights to some other song? If you're like, oh, this Whitesnake song would be a really cool intro to my podcast about 80s hair metal, that's great, but do you have the rights to the music? And so, for this particular podcast, it's something that Chris created with his own software. It's just some generic techno-y type music just to sort of get the show rolling. We don't have the rights to anything else. And we're just not willing to pay for that at this time. But John, do you run into this of people want to use copyrighted materials on your show, or, how have you sort of dealt with that?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so Dan's taking the piss out of me there with that, definitely, because we have not, changed the title music in 10-ish years. In fact, actually, probably not ever. I have to go back to episode 1. I don't think it's ever been changed. So we have, Mellow G by Funk Masters, which is, and of course, the joke is it's sort of like that bow chicka wow wow, thing going on, which has a whole realm of connotation that we won't go into. But yeah, it is so funny. It harkens back to when I was a little kid and I used to watch TV shows, and I was like, man, why don't they just change the opening every show? Like, why wouldn't they just do that? Why don't they change the end credits? And of course, that's once you start producing your own stuff, you realize that it's so much work to make the show itself. You're never going to go back and, clean the intro. Like if the intro works for today, then it's going to work for, forever.
For 14 more years.
Yeah. Cause in fact, so this is kind of funny. This is totally insider baseball. I paid a guy to do a Marketing Over Coffee intro who sounds like James Earl Jones. And that has been like in my file pile for at least 6 years. I just haven't gotten around to like swapping the new voice into the intro thing. And yeah, I've always wanted to have something like a Saturday Night Live intro, something with a kind of a full band going. Like that's just been something I wanted to do. And what you said, going back to your question now, finally looping back after only 10 minutes of, you can't just grab the Saturday Night Live song and put it on your podcast. Like you're going to get a takedown notice. Somebody's going to tell you, hey, you didn't pay for that. So you've got to get rid of that. So you do have to either write your own music, find somebody who writes music. I don't know. Back in the day, there used to be a lot of websites that had pod-safe music. That was a big thing. That's not really the same anymore. I'm trying to remember. Audio Network, I think, is a service that I've used in the past where you can say like, oh, I want something moody, a kind of room with a view type feel to it. And there'll be tracks there that you can buy and grab. And usually they're fairly inexpensive. And then another crazy thing on this front too, actually, Spotify, their podcast production tool just made an update where you can have live music tracks in your podcast. But of course, the listener has to be a Spotify subscriber. You pretty much can't monkey with the songs at all. You have to be in front of it, and then the song plays, and then it ends, and you come in, so you can't go over the song. Just a lot of licensing stuff. But yeah, basically don't use music you don't have permission from, because that's just going to be a huge headache for you at the very least.
Well, and it makes me think of, so one of the things, so John, you won my birthday this year because you got the Cameo of the guy from Cameo, being the service where you can pay for a celebrity to say a certain thing. Actually, the most recent thing I've seen is people have been using Cameo to break up with other people. which is a little weird. So you can find a celebrity and tell them what you want them to say, send the message to someone else. But you could probably use, if you're looking for someone who sounds like James Earl Jones or whoever, you could actually get them to probably introduce your podcast. You'd obviously have to pay for it, but then you could take the audio or the audio and the video, and then you would have Ryan Reynolds introducing Marketing Over Coffee. And of course he's reading going, I don't know what this is, but I got paid. And then you then have the celebrity.
Yeah, you have to. So you'll look in the postings, because it's funny. I was looking at the guy that does the voice of Master Chief in Halo. He kind of just has this rumbling voice of I'm ready to get action happening. In his cameo thing, it's like, I will do no promotional stuff. I will not link to your blog. I will not, he has a whole bunch of things he won't do. But yeah, it is a great way to get, somebody to get something going. Chip said, have Scott Monty do a voice impression. He can do most of the Simpsons. So if you need that, be sure to ping Scott Monty over on Twitter. He can set you up.
Well, and a little bit of plug. So I actually run another podcast. It's more of a lifestyle podcast, Punch Out with Katie and Carrie, with my good friend Carrie Gorgone. And we've interviewed Scott Monty. And it's actually a really great point that you bring up, Chip. If you're looking for someone, he does fantastic voiceover work. He's done it for a couple of different podcasts. And when we interviewed him, you can find his episode, I believe it's season 1. And he actually goes into a lot of the different voices and characters that he's able to do. So if you want a sample of that, yes, it is a bit of a shameless plug, but it's also, you can hear a sample of what Scott can do. He's a great friend. He's a great resource. So definitely hit him up at Scott Monty on Twitter. He's an excellent option.
He can get your in and out clips without any trouble.
That's right.
I just wanted to give another another plug actually to Libsyn for podcast hosting. So that's another part of it. Once you've got your audio files, you need to put them up on a server somewhere.
Yeah.
And so Libsyn has done that for us. And yeah, I know they've worked on your shows too. But it's a great deal to get your file up there. And then you need to create an RSS feed of some kind. So Libsyn can do that. That can actually generate a blog for you, which will have the file that Apple needs to go look at to find out when you're publishing new episodes, and all the other podcatchers need that too. So that's just another piece of the puzzle to kind of get it out the door. But yeah, that is pretty much the end to end. But what else? I don't know. I guess, Katie, for you first, anything else that I can kind of give you the inside look on?
I mean, there's so many questions. I feel like we could talk about how to create a really stellar podcast for hours, down to like, what style, what theme, what's the format. And so we could, talk about this forever, but maybe we can save that for another episode of So What, and really dig into the content of the podcast and how you, keep it fresh, how you create value, how you're delivering information that people care about. So as I'm saying it out loud, my wheels are spinning. I'm like, I'm going to write that down. We're going to do that at another time. One of the questions was around, can you put the links? So we will have the blog version of this podcast available on the Trust Insights website tomorrow, trustinsights.ai. And so we will include as many of the links as we can. And I'm sure that John, in the next Marketing Over Coffee newsletter, I'm giving you some homework, John, can link to this episode from our YouTube site, as well as the links that are included. So we will definitely have those in a couple of different places. And then one of the last questions that I think was really interesting was from Chip. How has the pandemic impacted your audience numbers? Has it at all? Have you seen them go up? Have you seen it go down? I mean, everybody's stuck at home.
Yeah, no, we've seen more growth than normal. So probably, let me think, as of mid last year, we were averaging about 55,000 downloads a month for Marketing Over Coffee. Wow. And as of March, it kicked up to like 70,000 downloads a month, and it's been pegged at 70 for the past 5 months now. So yeah, the pandemic for us has really increased overall downloads and overall traffic. I think podcasting is just, it's funny. I originally was afraid of it because commute time was gone. I thought that was such a huge portion of our listeners, people kind of on their way to work. But one thing I've heard from more than one listener is that, yeah, I'm kind of tired of the news cycle, and I really like to be able to listen to something else that's not, related to the world being on fire, yet again. And so, yeah, more people are picking it up, and I don't know. It's just great too. I would love to hear, even in fact, people want to throw out their favorite podcasts, because we're always looking for quality stuff. It doesn't have to be all work all the time. I'm a huge fan of all the Kevin Smith podcasts, because I'm a comic and hero geek, and he has a bunch of great stuff on that front. But there's just so much quality stuff out there. I think, this is kind of the right time to jump on board and find something you like.
My husband there's a couple that he likes to, so he listens to the Nerdist podcast. So that he's a big fan of that one. He listens to the Conan O'Brien podcast, Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. And that was actually really good, because it's, Conan O'Brien interviewing people in podcast form. And then always he listens to the NPR's Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me.
They actually come out here live in this. Well, they, of course not this year, they weren't, but I've seen those guys live. They do a heck of a show. And the, Chris Hardwick and the Nerdist, that's a guy who's totally, made it because of podcasting. That podcast just was lit so much on fire that he's cracked through to the mainstream.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Trust Insights podcast, which is myself and Chris. Occasionally, John will join us, and it is work related, but we talk about machine learning, marketing, AI. So, as the owner of the company, I probably need to plug our own podcast as well. And that is every Wednesday you can get a new episode.
Yeah, no, the thing with that is if you find marketing over coffee to sometimes not be as hardcore as you like, you want to go check out In-Ear Insights, because you guys go deep with, full analytics and getting the numbers right.
We do, and we record it first thing on Monday morning, which is sometimes a little tough to wrap my head around what the heck we're talking about, but somehow we always manage to get it done.
That's great.
Well, John, we've been talking about, going behind the scenes of marketing over coffee for almost an hour. And again, we could talk about this kind of forever. So if you have questions, then feel free to drop us a line. You can join our free Slack group at Analytics for Marketers, trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. John is always present in that Slack group. So if you have questions specifically about marketing over coffee, you can definitely feel free to drop him a line, subscribe to the Marketing Over Coffee newsletter, and just follow Marketing Over Coffee on social media. I believe you're on Facebook and Twitter.
You can get us both over there. And I just want to thank everybody for listening to the show. This is, a huge and great privilege for me in my life to be able to talk with people who do the stuff that we do and have a great chance to share tips and tricks and be able to do our jobs better. So thanks to everybody who stopped by.
Awesome. Well, thanks, John. We appreciate it. And we will definitely do a follow-up around the content of the podcast. But for today, this is So What?
Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.